Part 107. Doomsday Special Forces. Author, Huanjing Chengzhu. Chapter 1061. At this time, because there was no pursuit by the wild boars, the two legions of the human race were finally safe. However, Li Yingning did not let the two legions rest because of this. Instead, he continued to let them march at a rapid pace, heading towards the defensive fortress. The closer a person reaches their limit, the easier it is to stimulate their potential. Of course, Li Yingning will not understand this truth, and he will never let go of this opportunity. After running for 6 hours, the two legions finally saw the defensive fortress. Many soldiers of the 3rd Legion were now in a semi-conscious state, being supported by soldiers of the 2nd Legion and running by instinct. After seeing the defensive fortress, the person who had already felt that he was about to fall immediately groaned, gathered some energy, and ran towards the defensive fortress desperately. After returning to the defensive fortress, Li Yingning directly ordered all the soldiers to return to the training hall where he had originally gathered, and Li Yingning himself returned directly to the central control hall. Take a good look among you. Do you feel that the team is much smaller than before? When all the soldiers were assembled again, Li Yingning's cold face appeared on the screen in front of them again. Dealing with mere wild boars, a group of creatures that haven't even reached level 5, you actually suffered such huge losses. Li Yingning's tone seemed a little angry, which was relatively rare for Li Yingning. He usually spoke without any emotion. What? Judging from your expressions, you all seem unconvinced. All the soldiers remained silent, but there was indeed reluctance on many of their faces. No matter what, their performance this time cannot be said to be bad, right? Even they themselves are quite satisfied with their performance. In fact, even Dong Huangtai and Haoshan looked at Li Yingning a little strangely. They naturally noticed the performance of these people before. To be honest, they felt that the performance of these guys, especially the performance of the 3 armies, can be said to be worlds apart. Especially their later performance, from the perspective of Haoshan and Qiyu Xintian, if their strength can be the same as that of the legion they led before, then the army under their command will definitely not be their opponent. Once the 2 armies meet, they must be completely defeated. Therefore, they feel that these people's performance today has been quite good. From the initial disobedience, to the fear of fighting when facing the enemy, to the final persistence, this is definitely a shocking reversal. No matter what, Li Yingning should also do compliments. Even if you don't praise them, you can't just blame them when they come up, as if they have lost the battle. In this case, won't it have an impact on morale? However, seeing Wang Feng and Duan Lei standing by as if nothing had happened, Dong Huangtai and the others did not say anything. They just watched the fun and wanted to see how Li Yingning would deal with it in the end. Could it be that they gave him a stick first and then gave him a sweet treat? Date. This should probably be the case, otherwise these soldiers will probably be in a mood next time. The imperial strategy requires both kindness and power, not just harsh criticism, at least that's what Haoshan and the others think. Humph. No one said anything, so I'll take it as your acquiescence. Li Yingning did not care about what Dong Huangtai and the others were thinking, but continued to lecture the soldiers. What are you dissatisfied with? Huh? Do you know how many people you killed in this battle? Nearly 110,000 people. You still want me to praise you? Don't say there are many enemies. What are they? No amount of pigs can change this fact. More than 100 million people took weapons and went to kill pigs. Instead, 110,000 people were killed by pigs. You still want me to praise you? You want me to praise you? Why do you praise you? Praise that you are better than pigs. You kill there are more pigs than people killed by pigs. Li Yingning's words slowly made the unwilling expressions on the faces of the soldiers disappear, replaced by expressions of shame. Although they also knew in their hearts that their enemies were definitely not pigs. Even if they were pigs, they were still wild boars. But no one dared to refute the instructor. At the same time, they also vaguely guessed what Li Yingning meant. Then, Li Yingning drew a horizontal line directly on the screen, and then drew a vertical line at 1/6 of the horizontal line, dividing the horizontal line into two sections, and then on the 1/6 section, wrote a number, 10. Then, he drew a vertical line on the remaining long horizontal line, wrote a 9 in the middle, and on the last horizontal line, Li Yingning directly circled a 0. Do you know what this is? Li Yingning pointed to the horizontal line and said, "This is the time for your battle." In the battle with those pigs, more than 100,000 people died in just 1/6 of the time. But in the next half of the time, you only lost less than 10,000. Why is this? Just when you entered the battlefield, when you were at your most energetic and at your peak, you suffered such heavy casualties. And what about the later period? Especially during the period when I ordered the evacuation and Mars and the others had not arrived yet. At that time, your physical strength was almost exhausted and you were retreating, but no one died. Can any of you tell me, this is why? Seeing that everyone was silent, Li Yingning snorted coldly, and then shouted. The people from the team that was the first to rush into the pigs came out and stood at the front. The 108 people who were secretly trained by Li Yingning quickly came out and stood in front of the screen. Although they were all scarred, and some were even missing arms and legs, there was no expression of pain on their faces. He stood at the front of the team with a determined face. These 108 people were not in the same training hall, but were deliberately separated by Li Yingning. Is that the captain? Li Yingning asked. Report to the instructor. I am a squadron leader, and among us, I have the highest military rank. A one-armed warrior spoke. Well, what's your name, and how many people were there when you formed the team? How many people are back now? Li Yingning nodded slightly and then asked. Report to the instructor. This man saluted a military salute with his remaining left arm, and then said in a loud voice. My name is Li Daking. When we formed the team, there were a total of 108 people. Now there are 108 people alive. Although all of them were injured, none of them were killed. Report completed. Yeah. Not bad. The instructor nodded again, and then said lightly. Your team is quite good. At least you didn't give me back everything I handed over to you. It's not like other people who saw a group of pigs and actually used the same formation as the pigs to fight with the pigs. Instead, being hummed by pigs, it seems they think they are cabbages. Holy shit. Mars was shocked. Is this what the instructor said? Others also looked shocked. Such high-level words with philosophy of life actually came from the instructor Li Yingning? Even Wang Feng and Duan Lei looked at the instructor in surprise. However, Wang Feng then showed a smile because he found that the instructor seemed a bit like number 7 now. As for the more than 100 million cabbages of the two legions, they were not shocked at all. Instead, they looked frustrated because they found that their originally complacent achievements were said by the instructors as if they were indeed bullshit. Check it out. People from the same home planet received the same training and faced the same enemies at the same time. Why didn't any of them die? And 110,000 of them died? If they could be like these people and team up from the very beginning instead of fighting independently, although there is no guarantee that none of them will die, but the number of casualties will definitely not reach 5 digits. Now they really feel that they are just like pigs. No, they are not even as good as pigs, they are just cabbages that pigs humiliate. It doesn't seem quite right. By the way, this cabbage doesn't seem to refer to men. Bar. Li Daking. The instructor ignored Wang Feng and the others' shock and continued. I now appoint you as the captain of the Special Brigade of the Third Army. You can organize this Special Brigade yourself. You can choose people from the Third Army at will. The establishment will be 10,700. Each 100 people will be a squadron, and the other 107 people are squadron leaders. Yes. Li Daking stood at attention, saluted, and responded loudly. Well. Your team can go down first, train for a while, and then discuss the candidates. I will give you 3 days. After 3 days, we will attack again. I hope that you can still do it in the next battle. How many people go out, how many people come back? Do you understand? Li Yingning continued. Yes. Guaranteed to complete the mission. Li Daking saluted again, then turned and left. Same for you. After Li Daking left, Li Yingning said to the remaining soldiers. 3 days later, we will launch another attack, but this time, there will be no more space battleships to pick us up. We need to fight and retreat all the way, and return here by ourselves. If you don't want to die, go back to recuperate. Think carefully about what you should do to prevent yourself from dying in the battle in 3 days. In addition, after the special brigade has finished selecting the people, I will give you the opportunity to form a team freely. You can form a team as you like. I will not limit the number and personnel. In short, you think for yourself, how can you kill pigs without if you get hit by a pig, do what you do. Disband now. After hearing Li Yingning's words, all the other warriors saluted at the screen and then dispersed. However, there seemed to be something extra in their eyes. Doomsday Special Forces. Author, Huanjing Chengzhu. Chapter 1062. Seeing these soldiers leaving, Instructor Li Yingning turned around, looked at Wang Feng and Duan Lei and said, in the past 3 days, I will supervise the situation of the Special Brigade. Keep an eye on the wild boar people. If they don't take the initiative to attack us, ignore them. If they come, just notify me and I will handle it. Understood. Instructor. Wang Feng and Duan Lei nodded in agreement. It seemed that the instructor wanted to use these wild boars as grindstones for the 2 legions. That would be fine, if these people could reach the level of the previous Guardian Legion. This level is of course of great benefit to the human race. That's right. Xiao Feng, come with me. When the instructor was leaving, he suddenly stopped, then called Wang Feng and left with him. Second Army and Third Army, assemble immediately. 3 days passed by in a blink of an eye. In the early morning of the 3rd day, the instructor's voice sounded in the communicator. The soldiers of the 2nd Army and the 3rd Army had already known that they would go on an expedition today, so they were already ready. After hearing the order from Instructor Li Yingning, they all came to the training hall to assemble as quickly as possible. However, this time, both the soldiers of the 2nd Army and the soldiers of the 3rd Army only brought cold weapons, not any hot weapons, not even pistols. Listen. I will not follow you on this expedition. It is up to you to decide how to fight the wild boars. I only have 2 requirements for you. On the screen, Instructor Li Yingning said expressionlessly. First, the battle against the wild boars this time is still dominated by the 3rd Legion. The 2nd Legion is only responsible for breaking up the rear during the retreat. Second, your battle with the wild boars will last for 24 hours. Time on the road is not included. Remember, you don't have any backup this time. The only people you can rely on are yourself and your comrades. Now, the whole army sets off. After the instructor gave the order, the soldiers of the 2nd and 3rd Legions immediately walked out of the defensive fortress and headed towards the wild boar base. Their speed was not fast, because the instructor did not specify how fast they should march, so they had to save their energy as much as possible. This time the instructor made it very clear that they would have to fight the wild boars for 24 hours, and there was no backup. In other words, their fighting time will definitely exceed 24 hours, because the wild boar people will definitely pursue them, and without the support of the space battleship, no one knows how long the wild boar people will pursue them. Therefore, it took them 7 hours this time to reach the outskirts of the wild boar camp, the ravine that had been bombarded by the space battleship of the Martian trio. Captain, you just wait here. After we have fought for 24 hours, it will be up to you to stop the wild boar's pursuit. After arriving at the gully, Li Daking said to a person who had reached level 7. This person was called Yu Fukun, the commander of the 2nd Legion. Like Wang Feng and the others, he also came from the planet Atlantis. Survivor. Okay. Be careful. Yu Fukun nodded. Build the bridge now and get ready to start. Li Daking shouted loudly, and then the soldiers of the Third Army lowered the ladders they brought and placed them across the ravine to act as a springboard to cross the ravine in front of them. When all the soldiers of the Third Army crossed the bridge, they immediately dispersed and formed countless 100-man squads. And at the front were the 100 and 700-man squadrons of Li Daking's newly formed special brigade. Li Daking did not join any team because his current identity is already the commander of the Third Army, because Li Yingning had long discovered that Li Daking's control of the situation during the war was almost as good as Wang Feng's. He fought hard, so he could be trained, and based on the last record of their centurion without a single death, he was directly promoted to the commander of the 3rd Legion, and he was responsible for commanding the 3rd Legion. Naturally, no one questions the instructor's order. Not to mention that the Centurion team led by Li Daking has such an outstanding record. Even if it doesn't, there is absolutely no one who dares to stand up and object. Everyone, please save your energy. This time, we have to continue the attack all day and night. Remember, no one should rush forward because of greed, especially the wild boar people cannot be chased, let alone enter the underground caves. Pay attention to maintain the formation. Li Daking shouted loudly. Okay. Start moving forward, be careful not to break away from the main force. I hope that in this battle, not only our Special Operations Brigade, but also all the brothers of our 3rd Army can return alive. The instructor is right, the enemy is just a bunch of pigs, even if they can stand and walk, they are still a bunch of pigs. We are not cabbage and cannot die in front of pigs. Drink. As soon as Li Daking finished speaking, the soldiers of the 3rd Legion let out a loud shout. Then, the entire 3rd Legion began to slowly move forward towards the wild boar camp. As for their arrival, the wild boars seemed very excited. Although they lost a lot of people in the battle 3 days ago, they also killed more than 110,000 human beings. For them, this is not a loss. Although they didn't know how many people there were in the human race and how many they had to kill to complete the guarding mission, as long as they kept killing, they could eventually reduce the number of humans to 40%. These wild boars had been to the human defense fortress before, but after seeing the defense fortress, they did not launch an attack and retreated. Although the technology of the wild boars was very poor and they were basically in a primitive society, it did not mean that they knew nothing. At least they knew about beam cannons and knew the power of beam cannons. After seeing so many beam cannons on the human defense fortress, these wild boars wisely chose to retreat and did not launch an attack. Although Wang Feng and his men saw these wild boars, they did not attack, so they did not react. They knew that these wild boars were to be kept as sparring partners for the 2 legions. Although the wild boars did not attack the human defense fortress, at least their trip was not in vain, because from the area of the defense fortress, the wild boars judged that there should not be many people in the human race, which was undoubtedly good news for them. Because the fewer the number of human race, the fewer people they need to kill. For the wild boars, they naturally cannot understand the spatial attributes. In their opinion, the human defense fortress can only accommodate more than 200 million people at most. According to this number, as long as the human race continues to attack, they should be able to complete the guarding mission in a short time, and according to the number of their people, it is also enough to consume, so now seeing the human race attack, of course they are very excited. The armies of the two tribes approached each other quickly, but unlike the first time, the wild boars' camp was still so chaotic this time, while the human race had already formed a formation at the very beginning. Countless triangular assault formations rushed directly into the wild boars' camp, and then quickly switched to a circular defense formation, and began to continuously harvest the lives of the wild boars. For this battle, the human soldiers still had some confidence, because in the first battle, Li Daking and his team of 100 people still maintained their combat effectiveness even after returning to the human defense fortress. In other words, as long as they did not waste their physical strength desperately and persisted for 24 hours, they could still achieve it. Therefore, the soldiers of the Third Legion are only thinking about how to minimize their losses. The soldiers of the Second Legion stayed on this side of the ravine, because the instructor said very clearly that they could not take action and could only cover the rear. Now the soldiers of the two legions have also understood the instructor's meaning. In fact, the instructor is using these wild boars as their whetstone to improve their combat effectiveness. After understanding this, the resentment of these soldiers towards the instructor disappeared, because in fact, they also know that the stronger they are, the farther they can go in this endless road. Although the Hope Expeditionary Force is strong, it is not them after all. No matter what they can really rely on is their own strength. So now the Third Legion is full of fighting spirit. Although the number of people is much less than that of wild boars, the current situation on the battlefield is that humans have an overwhelming advantage. After the war went on for a while, the wild boars also found something wrong. They had lost tens of thousands of people, but they didn't kill any human beings. Some human beings were injured, but they hid in the center of their formation in the blink of an eye and disappeared from their sight, making it impossible for them to kill them. After seeing this situation, the high-ranking officials of the wild boars gathered together to discuss, but their brains were not very smart. After discussing for an hour, they only came up with a way to increase the number of troops. So, more wild boars emerged from the cave and began to attack the human camp with all their strength, and also began to surround the human race from the outside. They planned to surround all these human warriors and then use numbers to grind them all to death. In the eyes of the wild boars, as long as all these 80 to 90 million warriors were left here, their guarding mission would definitely be completed. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Doomsday Special Forces. Author, Huanjing Chengzhu. Chapter 1063. This approach of the wild boar people instantly increased their own casualties, because they were using their own people to fill the gaps in the circular defense formations composed of hundreds of teams in the entire human camp, and then the defense formations were filled. While turning, it was constantly strangled. But their method also put a lot of pressure on the soldiers of the Third Army. Although no one among them has died yet, their physical consumption has suddenly increased. If this situation continues, I'm afraid it will be difficult to persist for 24 hours. However, the soldiers of the Third Army did not panic because of this. On the way here, Li Daking had told them many situations that would occur, and this was one of them. The soldiers of the Third Legion tried their best to conserve their physical strength while resisting the influx of wild boars, hoping to last until the end of the battle. This situation was naturally noticed by Wang, who was in the defensive fortress. They saw the wind. Wang Feng frowned, then he made a mental calculation and turned to look at Duan Lei. In this case, it is estimated that they will not be able to hold on for 24 hours. If they insist on holding on and the Second Corps really obeys the instructor's order and does not take action, they will definitely suffer heavy losses. Duan Lei nodded. I can see this, but since the instructor has no other orders, he must have his own intentions. We shouldn't interfere, right? After Wang Feng hesitated for a moment, he finally shook his head, looked at the screen and said nothing. Duan Lei was right. Although the instructor left the central control hall, he could still monitor the battlefield of the Third Army in his room. Since he had done nothing, he really couldn't send people there without permission. Support them. Since the instructor said that this level should be handled by him, he might as well just treat it as a spectator and there is no need to intervene in anything. As time went by, the long-term and high-intensity fighting finally made the soldiers of the 3rd Legion begin to become tired, and casualties began to appear among the team. Some soldiers were pulled out of the battle by the wild boars because they had no time to escape. Array, and was immediately cut into pieces. The human race finally began to suffer casualties, and the wild boar people began to become excited, as if the humans surrounded by them were already in their pockets, and this also made the senior management of the wild boar people think that their decision was quite correct. At this time, exactly 12 hours had passed, which was half the time specified by the instructor for the soldiers of the Third Army. The instructor's voice finally came from the communicator. 2nd Legion, from now on, all join the battle. The 2nd Legion, which was originally on standby on this side of the ravine, immediately jumped in after hearing the instructor's order and entered the 3rd Legion's camp. The addition of the 2nd Legion immediately relieved the pressure on the 3rd Legion. Because the 2nd Army was still joining the battle in a 3-person team this time, and it had long been known that the 3rd Army was under too much pressure before, so the soldiers of the 2nd Army broke through the siege of the wild boars. After entering the 3rd Army's camp, he deliberately rushed to the front and helped the 3rd Army block most of the wild boars. Seeing the arrival of reinforcements, the 3rd Army immediately changed its fighting method and reduced its formation. In this way, more soldiers could enter the inner circle to rest and recover, and it could also give the 2nd Army's the soldiers made more room. Seeing the reaction of the 3rd Army, Wang Feng couldn't help but nod secretly. This Li Daking is indeed good. He can respond quickly to the situation on the battlefield. He is a general material. It's just that his strength is not high, so he can only be placed in the 3rd Legion for the time being. With the addition of the 2nd Legion, the battlefield once again fell into a stalemate, and the casualties of human soldiers also quickly decreased, making the wild boars even more impatient. But they have no other choice but to continue to increase their troops. However, the battlefield is so big that no matter how many wild boar people there are, they cannot launch an attack at the same time. The wild boar people outside can only wait until those tribesmen who are fighting against the human race. Only after death can you rush to the front. Although nearly 1 million wild boar people have died, there are not many corpses visible on the battlefield, because all the wild boar people who died in the battle were cut into corpses and devoured by their own tribe, and the wild boars after devouring the bodies of their companions' people's strength has also been improved. As for those human warriors who died in battle, there were no bones left. The wild boars would not even spare the corpses of their own kind. How could they spare the corpses of human warriors? The fierce battle continued. Due to the addition of the 2nd Legion and the tactical adjustment of the 3rd Legion, the battle situation stabilized an hour after the 2nd Legion joined the battle, and human soldiers basically did not die in battle. This is also due to the habits of the wild boars. If they hadn't eaten all the corpses of their fallen compatriots, the accumulation of nearly 1 million corpses would have had a great impact on the formation operation of the human warriors, but obviously the wild boars people don't realize this, and for them, meat is still relatively rare in the Endless Tower. Of course they won't let go of the delicious food in their mouths. The time has finally come to the time set by the instructor, but at this time, it seems that evacuation is not an easy thing, because the 2nd and 3rd Legions are now surrounded by the wild boar army. It is not easy to break through and get rid of the wild boars' pursuit. Especially if they want to retreat, they must change the formation. Otherwise, if they retreat with the current circular defense formation, it is undoubtedly a pipe dream to want to distance themselves from the wild boar. Moreover, the ladders they used to cross the ravine have been taken away by the wild boar. Therefore, if they want to retreat, they must bypass the ravine, which also makes their retreat very difficult. At least they will have to go a long way in the encirclement of the wild boar. Li Daking analyzed the situation on the battlefield and found that no matter what, they had to change the formation and bypass the ravine from both sides, so he had to prepare to order the soldiers of the 3rd Legion to change their formation. However, just when Li Daking was about to order a change of formation to break out, Mars' voice suddenly rang out in his communicator. Li Daking, prepare to evacuate along the original route, we will be there soon, and we have brought you the ladders. Maintain the current formation, don't panic, and retreat slowly. Li Daking hurriedly looked back and found that a space battleship had indeed appeared in his sight. He was overjoyed and hurriedly ordered the 3rd Legion, slowly retreat to the ravine, prepare to evacuate, and pay attention to maintaining the formation. Don't panic. It turned out that the instructor had sent Mars and his men out 4 or 5 hours ago, but the instructor told Mars and his men not to attack immediately after they arrived, but to wait until the 2 legions held out for 24 hours before coming out to rescue. Now the time has come, and Mars and his men have been observing the battlefield. They know that the soldiers of the 2 legions, especially the 3rd Legion, are already somewhat exhausted, so they immediately contacted Li Daking and told him about their existence. The commander of the 2nd Legion naturally got the news, so he quickly ordered 2nd Legion, press forward on all fronts, resist the wild boar army, give the brothers of the 3rd Legion time to evacuate. After receiving the order, the 2nd Legion immediately pressed forward on all fronts, pushing the wild boar line back a little, so that the soldiers of the 3rd Legion had room to retreat. As for the wild boars that surrounded them from behind, they could only be dealt with by the 3rd Legion themselves, because the 2nd Legion had only more than 10 million people in total. On a battlefield with hundreds of millions of people appearing at the same time, it was impossible to stop all the wild boars, even if their strength was much higher than that of the wild boars. Fortunately, the soldiers of the 2nd Legion were still full of physical strength, and they were all 3-person combat teams, so they were very flexible, and now they were ready to evacuate, so they didn't have to save their physical strength anymore. So for a while, the soldiers of the 2nd Legion opened fire at full power, instantly causing some chaos in the wild boar line. Some combat teams, in order to make the water more muddy, even went deep into the wild boar camp and kept killing the wild boar around them. 10 minutes later, the Mars Trio's space battleship finally arrived at the battlefield and released 100,000 fighters inside. After seeing the space battleship coming to their camp again, the wild boar army suddenly became more chaotic. The last time Mars fired a volley, it directly blew a long gully in the ground, which made the wild boars a little afraid of the space battleship. Although the space battleship did not fire at their camp last time, this time after seeing the Yanhuang, the wild boars still turned around and ran towards their camp. And the leaders of those wild boars went directly into the cave and fled downwards desperately, because according to the depth of the gully, they felt that they had to run at least 100 meters underground to be slightly safer. Because the entire wild boar army retreated, the soldiers of the 2 legions were able to evacuate easily. They even had time to kill the wild boar who had surrounded them from behind. After killing them all, they withdrew from the ladders that Mars had sent people to rebuild on the ravine and marched towards the human defense fortress. Doomsday Special Forces. Author, Huanjing Chengzhu. Chapter 1064. After all the people retreated to the defensive fortress, they immediately counted the casualties. In this attack, the 3rd Legion lost more than 2,000 soldiers, while the 2nd Legion still had no casualties. One reason was that the difference between the wild boar people and the soldiers of the 2nd Legion was a bit large. Another reason was that although the 2nd Legion played as an auxiliary in these 2 battles, it had truly experienced the fighting on the battlefield, and thus gradually matured. When all the soldiers of the 2 legions gathered in the training hall again, Li Yingning just said to the communicator, "Everyone disband, go back and rest, and continue in 3 days." Then, Li Yingning turned off the communicator, turned around and looked at Wang Feng and Duan Lei, and said, "It's almost done, there is no need to stay on this level any longer, wait for 3 days, let them go first, after fighting for 24 hours, you will lead the Hope Expeditionary Force to attack, complete the killing mission on this level, and enter the next level." Wang Feng and Duan Lei looked at each other, and then nodded together. "Understood, Instructor." So, 3 days later, when the two legions gathered again and then headed towards the wild boar camp, Wang Feng also said to the Hope Expeditionary Force 15 hours later, the order was issued for the entire army to attack the wild boar camp. Just when the two legions had been fighting in the wild boar camp for 24 hours and were preparing to evacuate, they suddenly discovered that a large number of troops had come out from behind them and swept into the wild boar camp like a whirlwind. No need to retreat. If you still have the strength, just charge in. If you are tired, just watch the excitement from behind. We will pass this level today. I hope that the words of the expeditionary soldiers will finally make the soldiers of the two legions understand that, in the eyes of the instructors, these wild boars basically have no training effect on them now, so they are ready to enter the next level. Since it is the last battle, the soldiers of the two legions will naturally not be willing to be soy sauce, so they also followed the expeditionary soldiers and charged in. This time, they went straight into the dungeon. The Hope Expeditionary Force didn't take these wild boars seriously at all. They didn't even need to form a battle formation. They just went in alone to kill them. The wild boars were actually a gift to the human race. They didn't pose a threat at all. If the Hope Expeditionary Force had been dispatched on the first day, they would have passed this level long ago. It was just to train the soldiers of the other two legions and let them adapt to the real battlefield, so they were delayed here for so long. Of course, this period of time was not wasted. At least the soldiers of the two legions grew a lot after experiencing these battles. Although their strength was still at the bottom, their combat effectiveness had made a qualitative leap compared to when they just entered this level. In the first battle, the Third Legion suffered numerous casualties in the first 2 hours of contact with the wild boars, with more than 100,000 casualties. In the last battle, with the same enemy and a larger number, they only lost less than 100 people in 24 hours, especially the special brigade formed by Li Daking and his team. Not even one person was killed, and it can be said that they have already formed the prototype of an elite force. Of course, this is also related to the weak strength of the wild boars, but no matter what, after this level of training, at least the Third Legion has the strength to fight and has the appearance of a real soldier. Due to the participation of the Hope Expeditionary Force, the battlefield was basically one-sided. After just over 5 hours, a voice rang in the minds of all human members. On the second floor of the Endless Tower, the guarding race, the Wild Boar tribe, has lost more than 40% of its members. The portal is open. Humans can enter the portal at any time and continue to kill. When any human enters the portal, all humans and their supplies will enter the next floor of the Endless Tower at the same time. After hearing this voice, Wang Feng thought about it, then flashed to the outside of the defensive fortress, looked at the newly appeared portal next to the defensive fortress, took a deep breath, and then strode into the portal. After Wang Feng entered the portal, the human warriors in the wild boar camp also disappeared at the same time, and after those wild boars found that the humans suddenly disappeared, they were stunned for a long time, and finally realized that the humans had given up on continuing to kill them, and left directly to the next floor, so they immediately began to revel. Although they lost nearly half of their people after the battle with the human race, at least their race was not extinct, and the people who are still alive are no longer in danger. As long as they are given enough time, their race will grow stronger soon. Now the wild boars only hope that the human race can break through as many levels of the Endless Tower as possible to leave them enough time. For the wild boars, the Endless Tower is obviously more suitable for their survival than the original star, because on the original star, they have to be slaughtered and enslaved by the surrounding races, and the race cannot grow at all. But in the Endless Tower, only their race exists, especially after the human race leaves. They are equivalent to no danger at all, even if the resources here are very scarce, but the wild boars don't need many resources. For them, the Endless Tower is basically equivalent to heaven. When Wang Feng appeared on the next floor of the Endless Tower, the warriors who were killing wantonly in the wild boar camp also came to Wang Feng and appeared next to the defensive fortress. Most of them still maintained their fighting postures, with the weapons in their hands either chopping or attacking, and making various attack movements. At this time, when they found that the enemy in front of them suddenly disappeared, immediately turned around and looked around, and then realized that they had entered the next level of the Endless Tower. Everyone, go back and repair. The reconnaissance team set off immediately. Wang Feng shouted in the communicator, and then walked towards the defensive fortress. He had not chosen to kill all the wild boar people before, although according to the strength of the wild boar people, they had to do this except for many apart from the room charge for a little while. There is basically no loss at all. With the addition of the Hope Expeditionary Force, the battle has become quite easy. The wild boars have no ability to resist their attack. However, Wang Feng did not continue to let the humans stay on the second level, but directly entered the third level. Because he could not reveal the matter of the controller's space to anyone, let alone tell all the guardians. After killing it, there will be a chance that the mark of the master will appear. In this way, if they continue to kill, it will become a massacre without any reason. No matter how much they kill before, they are just for their own survival. In order to pass that layer of the Endless Tower, this kind of killing with a clear goal, there was no problem for those human warriors to proceed. But if it continues, for Wang Feng, he is for the mark of the controller, but for other human warriors, it is just a pure massacre. Once this kind of massacre just for the sake of massacre is carried out too much, the human warriors will definitely be affected, and they may even turn into killing machines that have no emotions and only know how to kill. Such warriors are definitely not what Wang Feng and the others want. Moreover, Wang Feng actually has some resistance to the controller in his heart. He does not think that being a controller has any benefits, because it is obvious that the controller is not the most advanced creature in the world. To put it bluntly, he is just a chess piece. It's just that as a controller, you may live a more comfortable life without any danger, but the goal in Wang Feng's heart is not just to reach the height of a controller. But Wang Feng couldn't tell anyone this, not even Lu Wanting and Duan Lei. When the reconnaissance plane returned information about the creatures on this level, Wang Feng breathed a sigh of relief again. The guardian race on this level was not the Kali race, although Wang Feng also knew in his heart that the Kali race must also be here. In the Endless Tower, and they will definitely encounter it in the future, but Wang Feng always hopes in his heart that the sooner this time comes, the better. This should be a headhunter tribe. They also belong to a barbaric race. They have no technology, but they are powerful individually and like to fight. Dong Huangtai looked at the picture sent back by the reconnaissance plane and said, "There are not many of them. The total number should not exceed 300 million. Their strongest strength should have reached level 7 or 8. Generally speaking, the enemies in this level are not too difficult for us. It's just that, the 3rd Legion should have no chance to fight. Their strength is too far behind that of the headhunters. If they are allowed to fight, they will suffer heavy losses. Moreover, have you seen the weapons in their hands? This is not an ordinary stick, but a tool they use to shoot blow darts. Their blow darts are very poisonous. It is estimated that creatures below level 8 cannot withstand it. Stay." The last words of Dong Huangtai were meant for instructor Li Yingning to hear, because he was afraid that Li Yingning would still train the 2 legions on this level. The 2nd Legion might be able to do it, but the 3rd Legion had not reached the level of 5. If a level warrior is also used as the main force on this level, he will definitely suffer heavy losses. Xiao Feng. On this level, you go up with the Hope Expeditionary Force and the 2nd Legion. Remember to train those 2nd Legion soldiers who don't have enough combat experience. Li Yingning looked at Wang Feng and said, then turned and left. It seemed that Li Yingning did not want to participate in the battle on this level, but left it directly to Wang Feng to take the Hope Expeditionary Force and the 2nd Legion to solve it. Clear. Wang Feng responded softly, and then walked outside. Doomsday Special Forces. Author, Huanjing Chengzhu. Chapter 1065. Although the personal strength of the headhunters is relatively strong, they are incomparable to the Hope Expeditionary Force. Secondly, their numbers are not very large. Therefore, at this level, Wang Feng and the others did not even participate in the battle with space battleships. With a record of 0 deaths, the killing mission on this floor was successfully completed. Entered the next level. It may be that during this expedition, the human race encountered a relatively powerful race on the first level, the goblin race. Therefore, the human race did not encounter any powerful race in the subsequent dozens of levels. Races, and they are all relatively backward in technology. With the powerful Hope Expeditionary Force as the main force, the human race passed through the dozens of floors of the Endless Tower relatively smoothly, and the casualties were not large. Adding them all together, no one was killed in the battle with the wild boars on the 2nd floor. There are many numbers. However, when they reached the 100th floor, the human race finally encountered a more powerful race. After just entering the 100th floor, the reconnaissance plane was still the first to attack as usual to investigate the status of the defenders on this floor. However, this time at this stage of the investigation, an accident occurred. Because detecting the enemy's situation is the most important thing for the human race, the pilots of the reconnaissance planes are all elites in the Hope Expeditionary Force. For them, Wang Feng and Duan Lei are naturally quite relieved. The first person to make the discovery this time was an expeditionary soldier named Hu Tao. He was also one of the earliest Guardian warriors and had participated in the Battle of Black Dragon Bridge. It can be said that he has followed Wang Feng and the others all the way to the present, and has experienced countless bloody battles. Whether it is combat experience or personal strength, he is the best among the expeditionary forces. After entering the 100th floor this time, Duan Lei once said that this time it was an integer level, and it might not be that simple, so everyone should be careful. Naturally, Hu Tao would not turn a deaf ear to Duan Lei's words, so it seems to be more cautious. After passing the previous 99 floors of the Endless Tower, these scouts now have a lot of experience. The racial bases in the Endless Tower are not fixed in one direction, or their locations are random. Therefore, enemy bases may appear in any direction and at any distance. They have encountered enemy bases that are less than an hour away from them, and have also encountered enemy bases that require a week of flight to reach them. Base. This time the enemy base seemed to be relatively far away from them, because after Hu Tao flew the fighter plane in the air for a day, he still did not find anything abnormal, and there was no other reconnaissance aircraft in the communicator. Report. Now they already know that the enemy on each level has only one base. Therefore, once the reconnaissance plane's communicator reports that the enemy base has been discovered, the other fighters can return directly. There is silence in the communicator now, which means that no reconnaissance plane has found any traces of the enemy yet. Oh no! It's so far away. There's more fun this time. Hu Tao couldn't help but muttered, because the farther away the enemy's base is from them, the more inconvenient it will be for them to attack. Although the defensive fortress can fly, it consumes a lot of money, so it can only be used in emergencies. Use it all the time, at least since the goblins transformed this defensive fortress. Wang Feng and the others only conducted a test flight during the experiment, and then never let the defensive castle take off again. It is said that the energy consumed by the defense castle when flying is about 50 times that of the space battleship. Especially at the moment when the defense fortress is lifted into the air, The energy consumed is at least 100 times that of the space battleship. After reaching the air, the consumption is much smaller. As long as it is not flying at high speed, it is about 10 times the consumption of a space battleship. This is normal. After all, the defensive fortress is not a specialized aircraft. In terms of shape and material, it is not like a space battleship, which is specially designed to fly. Therefore, in the previous battles, even if the enemy was far away, at most, the human race just dispatched space battleships to send the army there, but never once did they directly move the defensive fortress there. Just when Hu Tao was muttering to himself, he suddenly seemed to find a light in front of him. Before Hu Tao had time to take a closer look at what it was, a warning signal suddenly came from his heart. Without thinking, he reached out and pulled it down. The cockpit's ejection button. Whoosh! The hatch of the small fighter plane popped open instantly, and the driver's seat in the cabin also popped up instantly, rising into the air like a rocket. Almost at the same time that the seat popped up, the small fighter plane was hit by a stream of light and exploded instantly. The wreckage is flying in the air. And just as the pilot's seat of the plane climbed high into the sky, another stream of light suddenly flew from the distance, and directly hit the rising seat in the air at an extremely fast speed, turning it into a blazing fireball. After about tens of seconds, a battleship about a quarter of the size of the Yanhuang space battleship slowly floated over. It patrolled the sky where the small fighter plane exploded. When it found that there were no enemies, it turned around and left. About 10 minutes after the mysterious battleship left, a man suddenly emerged from the ground beneath the explosion of the small fighter plane. He carefully looked at the direction in which the battleship disappeared, then sat on the ground and looked at his right leg. This person is the pilot of that small fighter plane, Hu Tao. Although he had pulled the ejection rescue lever of the cockpit before, he did not eject with the seat. Instead, while the seat was spread out in the air, he escaped directly through an escape hole at the bottom of the fighter cockpit. And just when he emerged from the escape hole and fell to the ground, the small fighter plane exploded. He was unable to escape in the air. He was directly affected by the shock wave of the explosion, and was hit by 3 pieces of the wreckage of the small fighter plane. Hu Tao fell heavily to the ground. He didn't have time to check his injuries. He dug a hole in the ground with his hands. Then he buried the blood around it with the soil he dug out. Then he got into the hole himself, hid himself, and directly reduced his breathing and heartbeat to a minimum, entering a state of simulated hibernation. Sure enough, not long after he finished all this, the battleship appeared. Fortunately, Hu Tao hit it directly. And whether the battleship was searched carefully, he probably felt that the people in the battleship, even if they did not die in the battleship, in the explosion, he was also killed by the stream of light behind him, so he turned around casually and left. Looking at the wreckage of the fighter plane on his right leg and chest, Hu Tao couldn't help but grit his teeth. Fortunately, he had now become a mid-level 10th level expert. Otherwise, even if his judgment was correct, he could have escaped being directly hit by the mysterious stream of light. Fate, but he will definitely die because of these 3 pieces of fighter plane wreckage. After taking out the communicator in his breast pocket and checking it, Hu Tao breathed a sigh of relief. Although a piece of fighter plane debris had been inserted into his chest and even penetrated into his heart, fortunately, the communicator was actually very magical. Not destroyed. Hu Tao couldn't help but secretly rejoice. Fortunately, the wreckage of the fighter plane had penetrated his heart, not the communicator. However, after thinking about it, Hu Tao put the communicator aside again, then gritted his teeth and pulled out the piece of fighter plane debris from his right leg, then stood up and started walking in the direction he came from. Sprint. Headquarters, please pay attention. I have found enemies here. My fighter plane has been destroyed. I did not see the appearance of the enemy. I only saw their battleships. Their weapons are very fast, and the radar of small fighters cannot detect the emission of their weapons. Attack, I recommend withdrawing all reconnaissance aircraft. Hu Tao ran as hard as he could and reported the situation he encountered to Wang Feng and the others, because he knew that while he was reporting, his comrades in other reconnaissance planes could also hear his voice, for fear that they would come. To save myself, I especially emphasized the power of the opponent's weapons. Liza. Let all the reconnaissance planes return immediately. I will rescue Hu Tao. After hearing Hu Tao's report, Wang Feng immediately ran outside. Because Hu Tao was an old man, Wang Feng remembered his name. Moreover, after his fighter plane exploded just now, the defensive fortress also showed that his fighter plane had been destroyed. The location of the destruction. It's just that they haven't contacted Hu Tao before because they didn't know the situation there and were afraid that their voices would reveal Hu Tao's location. Now that he heard Hu Tao's report, Wang Feng naturally knew that they might have encountered a powerful race this time, so he immediately prepared to rescue Hu Tao. After appearing outside the defensive fortress by running and teleporting, Wang Feng directly took out his Yanhuang number, and then teleported directly to the control hall of the Yanhuang number and activated the Yanhuang number. In order to save time, Wang Feng did not without one, he drove the Yanhuang alone and flew directly in the direction of Hu Tao. Now in Wang Feng's Xianyuan space, there is only one space battleship, the Yanhuang. After the defense fortress was transformed, the other space battleships were all parked in the defense fortress. Even the small fighter planes, Wang Feng only stayed behind. I landed more than 20 of them and kept them in my own space for backup, and all the others were put into those space battleships. Wang Feng maximized the speed of the Yanhuang and rushed to the direction of Hu Tao. However, because the distance was too far, it was impossible for him to feel there quickly. Now he only hoped that Hu Tao would not be caught when he sent back the news. The mysterious enemy discovered. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Doomsday Special Forces. Author, Huanjing Chengzhu. Chapter 1066. Just as Wang Feng was flying rapidly in the direction of Hu Tao on the Yanhuang, another voice came from the communicator. Report to the headquarters. I am Luo Yaxing. I am the closest to Hu Tao. I request to rescue Hu Tao. Oops, my communicator is broken. Then, there was a snapping sound from the Tongxiu device, and Luo Yaxing said to himself. Damn. The communicator is broken. No matter what, go directly to the rescue. It's not a detour anyway, your head is so good, you won't blame me. Afterwards, Luo Yaxing's communicator was turned off directly. Wang Feng smiled slightly, then shook his head slightly. What the hell is the communicator broken? Just lie. It was obviously Luo Yaxing who wanted to rescue Hu Tao, but was afraid of being rejected by them, so he came up with such a trick. Especially in the end, this guy didn't forget to wear a top hat. However, Wang Feng didn't say anything. He knew the friendship between the soldiers of the Hope Expeditionary Force, especially since Luo Yaxing was also an old man who had come all the way from the Battle of Black Dragon Bridge. Naturally, his relationship with Hu Tao goes without saying. Besides, it would take him at least nearly 20 hours to reach Hu Tao. It would be fine if Hu Tao was not tracked by the Guardian race when he sent the message back. If those guys found out that Hu Tao was not dead, they would come out to pursue him directly. If so, Hu Tao's two legs couldn't outrun them, and he would definitely be dead. Wang Feng didn't know yet that Hu Tao actually didn't even have two legs now, and could only be regarded as 1.5 at most. He knew before that if he sent the message back immediately, he would probably be discovered by the mysterious race, but as a scout, Hu Tao certainly knows the importance of time to intelligence. Now that Hu Tao's fighter plane was shot down and he was injured again, it would probably take at least a week to return to the defensive fortress. Of course, he couldn't wait until then to report his intelligence. Especially since he had not discovered the opponent's camp before because he was destroyed by the opponent's warship. Who knows how many such warships of this mysterious race would be cruising outside? If you send the information back earlier, your comrades will be alert, lest they be shot down without any precautions like you. He was lucky just now. Unexpectedly, the string in his brain was short-circuited. Instead of being ejected with the seat, he escaped directly from below. Therefore, he escaped with his life. If he had been ejected with the seat at the time, once in the air, it is estimated that he is no longer there and has long since turned into a roasted pig in the air. When Luo Yaxing turned off the communicator, he flew directly towards the direction where Hu Tao's fighter plane was destroyed. He knew that someone from the headquarters might have come to rescue Hu Tao, but judging from the time, they were definitely not as fast as him. Come on, when the reconnaissance plane left the fortress, it radiated in all directions according to the clockwise direction, and next to him was Hu Tao's fighter plane. Therefore, if Luo Yaxing passes by, it will only take more than 10 minutes to reach the location where Hu Tao crashed at the fastest speed. As for the enemy's powerful weapons, is it more powerful than the goblins? Besides, even if the other party is stronger, you can't ignore your comrades, right? At worst, be careful, it's best if you can rescue him. If he can't be rescued, he will die together. At least he will have a companion on the road. When Luo Yaxing was heading towards Hu Tao's position, he pulled his fighter plane very high because Hu Tao said that the one that shot down his fighter plane was a warship. There was no cloud cover in the endless tower, so the higher you fly, the better your view will be. Moreover, the opponent must have the ability to block the radar of his own fighter planes, so Hu Tao was shot down without discovering the opponent's warships. So, now he can only rely on his own eyes to observe the surroundings. Soon Luo Yaxing approached Hu Tao's current position, about 3 minutes away from Hu Tao, and he also found on the radar that besides himself, there was actually another fighter plane approaching. Without asking, Luo Yaxing knew that the fighter plane belonged to Wei Laoki. Wei Laoki's name was Wei Jiake. Wei Laoki wanted the expeditionary force to give him the nickname. Only his fighter plane was also adjacent to Hu Tao's fighter plane. It's just that he and Luo Yaxing were on both sides of Hu Tao's fighter plane. Seeing Wei Laoki's fighter, Luo Yaxing was overjoyed. He was about to call him through the communicator, but suddenly realized that his communicator was damaged, so he quickly turned off the communicator that had just been opened, and then began to lower the height of the fighter. Prepare to pick up Hu Tao. Because Hu Tao is also a soldier of the Hope Expeditionary Force, and he also carries a communicator, both Luo Yaxing and Wei Jiake can clearly know Hu Tao's location, and Wei Jiake seems to react faster than Luo Yaxing. When they see Hu Tao displayed on the radar after his fighter plane was destroyed, it had already flown in this direction, so Wei Jiake arrived more than a minute earlier than Luo Yaxing. Fortunately, Wei Jia arrived more than a minute earlier. Although more than a minute seems to be a short time, if it is placed on a very fast small fighter plane, it is a very long distance. After Wei Jiake arrived at Hu Tao's place, he had already seen the warships flying towards here in the distance. It seemed that Hu Tao had indeed exposed his whereabouts when he used the communicator to report the results of his investigation to them, but still fortunately, Wei Jia arrived in time, landed a small fighter plane, and picked up Hu Tao. Hu Tao was seriously injured at this time. Not to mention flying, he had already lost a lot of blood during the moment of running. Although he had reached level 10 strength, even if his heart was pierced, he would not die from it, but bleeding too much, but it still makes his current state not optimistic. In the previous explosion, a total of 3 pieces of fighter plane debris were shot into Hu Tao's body. Except for the piece on his right leg, Hu Tao pulled it out directly because he wanted to get as far away as possible. There are two other pieces of fighter planes on the chest and waist. The piece on the chest was slightly smaller, but it penetrated directly into Hu Tao's heart and penetrated his body. As for the piece on the waist, it was because Hu Tao fell on his head and feet, so that piece, the metal piece, started from the waist and was inserted directly into his stomach. After Hu Tao managed to get into the fighter plane, Wei Jiake directly pulled up the fighter plane and ran towards the human defense fortress. He was only here to rescue Hu Tao, not to fight the battleship. Now that Hu Tao had been rescued, of course he leave immediately. As for Luo Yaxing's fighter plane, of course Wei Jiake knew it, but he couldn't stay and wait for him. Besides, seeing that he had escaped, Luo Yaxing would naturally not fight against the warship, and would definitely retreat with it. However, since Wei Jiake landed the fighter plane first and then picked up Hu Tao, there was a delay of nearly a minute. Therefore, the battleship of the mysterious race was not far away from Wei Jiake's fighter plane. Just when Wei Jiake's fighter plane was pulling up into the air and preparing to leave, the battleship had already adjusted its angle and was preparing to attack them, and Luo Yaxing's fighter plane was already here. When Luo Yaxing saw that the battleship on the opposite side seemed to be preparing to attack, he immediately struck first and attacked the battleship directly. Although Luo Yaxing felt that the energy beam emitted by the small fighter plane was not enough to cause damage to the battleship. Hurt, but at least disturb him, hoping to attract his attention. Lao Luo. Be careful. After Luo Yaxing opened fire on the local battleship, Hu Tao's somewhat weak voice sounded in his communicator. Their weapons are very fast, don't fight them, retreat quickly. I know. Shut up. Get out of here. At this time, Luo Yaxing had forgotten about the damage of his communicator, and started to curse directly. He stared at the battleship in the distance tightly, not daring to slack off at all. Now the distance from Luo Yaxing is close to his maximum range, so his energy beam must have minimal damage to enemy ships. Anyway, he just wants to interfere with the opponent. As for shooting down the opponent's warship, this kind of thing is temporary. Luo Yaxing hasn't thought about it yet. In his opinion, as long as he and Wei Jiake's two fighter planes can escape safely, even if they step on dog poop, it's better not to think too much about other things. Luo Yaxing's attack indeed successfully attracted the attention of the battleship. It seemed that such a small fighter was very angry when he saw that instead of running away, he actually launched an attack on him, so the battleship directly adjusted its position. In a certain direction, two streams of light flew out directly and rushed towards Luo Yaxing's fighter plane at an extremely fast speed. Luo Yaxing had already been prepared in his heart. Hu Tao had emphasized the opponent's weapons in his report before, and he had specifically reminded him just now that if Luo Yaxing had been careless, he would not be alive until now. When he saw a flash of light on the battleship opposite, Luo Yaxing didn't even look at where he was attacking. He pulled the fighter plane and climbed directly to the sky. Because of preparations and Luo Yaxing's driving skills, the two streams of light emitted by the battleship passed directly under Luo Yaxing and were dodged by Luo Yaxing. Wei Jiake took advantage of this opportunity and had already piloted the fighter plane left. After Luo Yaxing dodged the two streaks of light, he drove his fighter plane in the air as if he was drunk, flying around without any rules. The space battleship couldn't trace his flight trajectory at all, and naturally it couldn't do it again. Target and lock him. Doomsday Special Forces. Author, Huanjing Chengzhu. Chapter 1067. Although the fighter plane piloted by Luo Yaxing was flying randomly, the direction was naturally towards the human base, and the speed was already reaching the extreme. At this time, Wei Jiake's fighter plane had already moved away, so Luo Yaxing's mission was not considered. It's done. Now he just needs to be able to leave here safely and get rid of the pursuit of the battleship, and the mission is considered completed. However, when he saw Luo Yaxing trying to escape, the battleship refused to let him go. A bigger fighter plane actually wanted to hit him and run away. Even if it doesn't cause any harm to them at all, it can't be let go. What's more, the guarding races on this level know that there are no other races that can appear on this level except the human race. And the human race, no matter what the relationship between the two races is in the original star, at least at the moment in the Endless Tower, they are definitely on opposite sides. The speed of this battleship is also very fast, at least it has exceeded the speed of small fighters. However, the small fighter piloted by Luo Yaxing kept changing its route, making the battleship unable to do anything to him for a moment. This is because in the previous 99th floor, the entire reconnaissance team has been flying fighter planes, so the current reconnaissance team is already quite proficient in both the use of air and the driving of fighter planes. Therefore, beginning on the 20th floor, the reconnaissance brigade has changed from 2 people responsible for one small fighter plane to only 1 pilot. Fortunately, it is because of this. Otherwise, it is estimated that if Hu Tao's fighters were still in charge of 2 people at the beginning, although Hu Tao could still escape, the expeditionary soldier behind him would probably be killed directly. Fallen. Because the escape hole of a small fighter plane is only that big, the original design allowed the pilot and co-pilot to escape separately, but judging from the previous situation, there was no way to avoid the pursuit of the streamer when escaping to higher altitudes. Luo Yaxing's escape speed was not fast, because Wei Jiake's fighter plane was right in front of him. If he moved forward with all his strength, Wei Jiake's fighter plane would be dragged into the battle. Luo Yaxing has now guessed that Hu Tao must be injured. Then Wei Jiake's fighter plane cannot be like his small fighter plane. They are small fighters, not space battleships with inertial dampers. Hu Tao, who has been injured, if you go through this kind of torture again, I'm afraid your life will be short-lived. While delaying, Luo Yaxing concentrated on changing the fighter planes irregularly, preventing the battleships behind him from catching any of his patterns. Therefore, although the battleships behind him had launched many streams of light, there was no real one. The fighter plane that hit Luo's star. This is not to say that Luo Yaxing's driving skills surpassed Hu Tao's, but because Hu Tao had not noticed the battleship before. After seeing the stream of light, it was too late to dodge. Quick! If we go faster, we don't have to worry about my wounds. Looking at the small dot that kept jumping on the radar screen, Hu Tao yelled at Wei Jiake. He could certainly guess why Luo Yaxing's fighter jets were so irregular. It must be because the battleship was still chasing his fighter jets. Now they were even more certain that their radar could not detect the enemy's warship, because the closest thing to them was the light spot representing the small fighter plane of Roya's star, and did not show any other flying objects. And when the radar is zoomed in further, you can see that a space battleship of your own is rapidly approaching here. It's the fastest speed now. Hearing Luo Yaxing's words, Wei Jiake also said anxiously. He also knew that Luo Yaxing was buying time for them, so he didn't care about Luo Yaxing. Instead, he piloted the fighter plane and kept trying to stay away from the warship behind. That space battleship must be piloted by the leader. In terms of time, we will meet in about 4 hours. Looking at the space battleship on the radar, Wei Jiake said with some worry. Although both sides were now moving at full speed, the time for the space battleship to meet them was greatly shortened, but 4 hours was still a bit too long. Got it? Although Luo Yaxing is still unscathed now, he is dancing on the tip of a knife. Although it seems to be unscathed, as long as there is a slight pause and it is locked by the battleship behind, it will be instantly wiped out. Even if Luo Yaxing wants to do this to Hu Tao and get out directly from below, it is probably impossible to hide the battleship. One is that he is too close to the battleship now, and the other is that the battleship has been obtained by Hu Tao before. Lessons learned. Therefore, as long as Luo Yaxing makes a mistake now, the only price he will pay is death. Wang Feng has also noticed the situation ahead. Moreover, not only the airborne radar of Luo Yaxing and their small fighters cannot detect the opponent's fighters, but also his Yan Huang. The shipboard radar of the Yanhuang has been modified by the goblins, so that it cannot detect the opponent's warships, so it is estimated that the radar in the defensive fortress will be powerless against them. Wang Feng was secretly surprised. What kind of race is this race? Isn't it said that the goblins are the most technologically advanced race on the original star? Why are there warships that even the goblin-modified radar cannot detect? However, the original star is quite large, so it is normal that some low-key races are unwilling to show their strength. After all, due to lack of resources, even those warlike races, once they attack a certain race, they feel that this race does not seem to be very powerful. If they are easy to bully, they will basically stop attacking them. Therefore, what Dong Huang Tai and the others learned about the various races of the original star is actually not that comprehensive. Many of them are just legends, just like the current richest man in the world. In fact, although he is known as the richest man in the world, compared to some hidden truth for a rich man, maybe his wealth is just a drop in the bucket of others. While Wang Feng was rushing forward with all his strength, and Luo Yaxing and Wei Jiake were trying their best to escape, the people in the defensive fortress were all paying attention to the situation here. Xiao Lei. Let's go there too. The other side won't only have one battleship like this. If other battleships are also coming here, the lunatic might suffer a loss. Lu Feng looked at the screen and said. Yes. Brother Lei. Shall we come too? The Guardian race on this level seems to be very powerful. We need to attack with all our strength. Mars also said. Duan Lei frowned and stared at the screen quietly. After a long while, he slowly shook his head and said. No. Just leave it to the madman. We don't know what the opponent's strength is, so don't attack rashly. The life energy of the madman is enough. Let him do it by himself first and find out the details of the enemy. After hearing Duan Lei's words, Lu Feng thought for a moment and then nodded slightly. Compared with them, Wang Feng's biggest advantage is that he has enough energy stored in Xianyuan space. Although after the defensive fortress was built, Wang Feng has stored most of his life energy in the defensive fortress, but his remaining life energy is still quite huge for a space battleship. Therefore, no matter what, no matter how many warships there are, Wang Feng will be unable to defeat him at best. If he wants to evacuate, no one can stop him. At least his energy shield is definitely enough to last him until he retreats to the defensive fortress. And if they attack in a space battleship, because the space battleship only has so much energy reserves, once it is surrounded by enemy battleships and the energy is exhausted, there may be no chance to withdraw. On the contrary, it will become a burden for Wang Feng. In fact, the most important thing is that they simply don't know what race the enemy is, as well as the number and strength of their tribesmen, so they are unable to adopt corresponding response plans. The unknown is the most terrifying thing. Now in the defensive fortress these people finally clearly understood the meaning of this sentence. At this time, all the combat members were already in place. The defense legions had entered their respective positions in the fortress, and the soldiers of the two legions had all gathered in the training hall, ready to be dispatched at any time. After experiencing the baptism of the 99th level, the current soldiers of the 2nd Army and the 3rd Army no longer look like soldiers like they did before. They have all become elite soldiers, and even the soldiers of the 3rd Legion have all reached the level of 5-level creatures or above. However, most of them have not yet fully awakened their human racial talents. Therefore, you cannot fly a small fighter plane. But at this moment, they are all lined up neatly in the training hall. The dark crowd gathers, but there is no sound. Compared with the first time they gathered, it is no longer the same. Now as long as they hear the order, no one among them will question it and will definitely execute it without hesitation, just like what instructor Li Yingning said to them back then. If you want to question my order, you can, but you must question me after executing this order. In other words, even if I ask you to eat shit, you must come back after eating. Protest to me, and you can also tell me how that shit tastes. Lao Cai. Come in quickly. After more than 3 hours of rapid flight, Wang Feng finally reunited with Wei Jiakei's fighter plane. He directly opened the entrance and exit of the Yanhuang's small fighter plane, took Wei Jiakei's fighter plane into the Yanhuang, and then continued forward to assist Luo Yaxing's fighter plane. Doomsday Special Forces. Author, Huanjing Chengzhu. Chapter 1068. Because he had been fighting with the warship of unknown race for more than 3 hours, Luo Yaxing was still some distance away from them at this time, and now Luo Yaxing was already quite tired. Although he only needed to drive the fighter plane and basically did not need to consume much physical strength, his mental strength was always in a highly concentrated state. This kind of mental fatigue is even more debilitating than physical exhaustion, but fortunately, Luo Yaxing has seen that Wang Feng's Yanhuang space battleship has overlapped with Wei Jiakei's small fighter plane, and Wei Jiakei's small fighter plane immediately disappeared from his airborne radar, which means that Wei Jiakei and his team have entered the Yanhuang, and they are finally safe. Then Luo Yaxing himself has no worries now, so he suddenly speeds up and flies straight towards the Yanhuang, and just after Luo Yaxing turns into a straight flight, the battleship behind him finally seizes the opportunity and directly sends out 2 streams of light, shooting at Luo Yaxing's fighter plane. Luo Yaxing didn't even look back. When he started flying in a straight line, he had already expected that he would be attacked by the warship. So almost at the same time when the 2 streams of light flew out, Luo Yaxing's fighter plane dived directly to the ground, avoiding the 2 streams of light, and then flew close to the ground for a few seconds before quickly pulling up. Seeing Luo Yaxing's reaction, the warships that had been chasing him behind him stopped shooting and just kept biting Luo Yaxing's fighter plane, as if they wanted to chase him to the human base. After flying for another 2 or 3 minutes, Luo Yaxing finally saw the Yanhuang. At this time, the Yanhuang had raised its energy shield, and the ship's guns were fully charged, making all preparations before the battle. The warships behind naturally discovered the Yanhuang, and had also raised their energy shields. Seeing that the other warship also had energy shields, Wang Feng did not fire the ship's guns immediately, but just took in Luo Yaxing's fighter planes first. At this time, Wei Jiakei and Hu Tao had naturally come to the control hall of the Yanhuang, because the other warships were not attackable by their small fighters at all, so the following battles had basically nothing to do with them. The fighter fragments in Hu Tao's body had all been taken out at this time, and the wounds were simply bandaged. As a level 10 warrior, his wounds did not require any medicine. As long as they were simply bandaged to stop bleeding, his strong recovery ability would naturally allow his injuries to heal. After seeing the Yanhuang, the warships on the opposite side did not flee immediately because they were much smaller than the Yanhuang, but instead directly fired 2 streams of light at the Yanhuang. For these 2 streams of light, Wang Feng just turned the body of Yanhuang to the side. In this way, even if his energy shield could not withstand the opponent's attack, Yanhuang would not completely lose its combat effectiveness. And the opponent's warship was obviously just a tentative attack, so these 2 streams of light were equivalent to the human race and this mysterious race testing each other's strength. The test results made Wang Feng very relieved, because the 2 streams of light were directly blocked and offset by the energy shield of Yanhuang, and the energy consumed was not much, that is to say, facing the warship of this mysterious race, Wang Feng was basically invincible. However, just when Wang Feng, Luo Yaxing, Hu Tao and Wei Jia just breathed a sigh of relief, nearly 100 warships of the same size as the previous warship suddenly appeared around Yanhuang and rushed towards Yanhuang. And they were coming from all directions. When they just appeared, their encirclement had already formed, and as they advanced, it quickly shrank. Seeing this scene, Luo Yaxing opened his mouth wide. He suddenly realized that he was able to hold on for so long without being shot down by the battleship. It seemed that it was not because of his own ability, but because the battleship had not used its full strength. Its purpose was to wait for the arrival of the Yanhuang, and then make a tentative attack. It found that it was impossible to take down the Yanhuang by itself, so it asked other battleships to join the battle and prepare to leave the Yanhuang here. This race should not know much about the human race. At least they would not know that there were only 4 people in the Yanhuang. In their opinion, such a large space battleship would require at least hundreds of thousands of people to operate, and their purpose was to kill more than 60% of the human population and complete their guard mission. Wang Feng and his men naturally figured it out by now, but Wang Feng did not feel how wise the other party's plan was. If it was the Mars trio who drove the space battleship to rescue Luo Yaxing and Hu Tao, their plan would be successful, because in this situation, so many battleships would definitely be able to consume Mars energy shields and then destroy their battleships. But now it was himself who came, and Wang Feng, who had a large amount of life energy stored, did not believe that his shields could be consumed by these battleships. After these battleships appeared, Wang Feng immediately drove the Yanhuang to dive downwards. Although the Yanhuang was surrounded, it was a dead end because there was the earth below, and there were not many battleships below them, which was at least a breakthrough. Moreover, while taking action, Wang Feng directly launched the charged beam cannon of Yanhuang, and fired at a newly joined warship below. Wang Feng didn't know where the command ship of these warships was, because Hu Tao had encountered the first warship suddenly before, so that warship was not necessarily the command ship, so Wang Feng was too lazy to find it now, and directly picked a warship closest to him and opened fire. Perhaps because of self-confidence, or because he didn't dare to give way after receiving the order. In short, the warship attacked by Wang Feng did not make evasive actions, but used his own shield to resist the dense beam cannons fired by Yanhuang. However, they didn't know that there was only one driver on Yanhuang now, whether it was the movement of the warship or the firing of the beam cannon, it was all done by a human, so for Yanhuang, there was no situation where Jianyuan made mistakes due to coordination problems. Moreover, Wang Feng didn't know how many space battleships that were too confident in the power of their shields and were ready to resist with this volley, and this battleship was unfortunately among them. Although the energy beams fired by the Yanhuang were quite dense and seemed to cover a large area, under Wang Feng's control, the direction they attacked was all on a point of the opponent's battleship's energy shield. The battleship's shield was unable to withstand such a huge energy fire attack in an instant, and the battleship that didn't expect its shield to be so vulnerable didn't even have a chance to react. The next second after its energy shield was broken, it was completely shattered. A loud explosion sounded, and the Yanhuang seemed to have known this outcome long ago. It didn't stop at all and flew directly to the next battleship. Wang Feng didn't take the opportunity of a battleship to break through and escape directly, but chose to continue attacking. He wanted to use the Yanhuang to try these guys here to see what cards they had. Especially since all these creatures were in the battleship, they couldn't see their appearance at all. Therefore, until now, Wang Feng and his men didn't know which race their enemies on this level belonged to. No matter how strong the opponent was, at least they had to know who their enemies were first, right? Another space battleship saw Wang Feng rushing towards it, but it didn't dodge directly. However, the energy shield on its hull turned dark blue, which seemed to increase the support strength of the shield. Wang Feng certainly didn't know that the energy shield of the space battleship of this race was divided into 3 levels. The previous battleship only activated the intermediate shield. This was because it saw that Wang Feng's Yanhuang emitted too many energy beams, so it added a layer. Who knew that Wang Feng's attacks were all concentrated on one point, so the shield was directly damaged, becoming the first battleship destroyed in the battle between their race and the human race. If the Yanhuang, driven by Wang Feng, had rushed out of the encirclement before attacking their warships again, they might have chosen to dodge, but now Wang Feng's Yanhuang was still surrounded by them, so this space battleship did not choose to dodge, but chose to hold on. Moreover, while the Yanhuang attacked it, This battleship also launched a counter-attack against the Yanhuang, with nearly 100 streams of light flying out of the battleship and rushing directly towards the Yanhuang. At this time, other battleships also began to use firepower to support the attacked battleship, and countless streams of light rushed towards the Yanhuang like an overwhelming force, and Luo Yaxing and others in the Yanhuang could not help but feel nervous. Although they knew that Wang Feng had a lot of life energy reserves, just like the battleship that was destroyed just now, if the energy that hit the Yanhuang at the same time was greater than the maximum bearing capacity of the shield, no matter how much energy there was, it would be useless. The shield would be shattered directly without any time to replenish. At that time, the Yanhuang, which had lost the protection of the shield, would naturally follow the fate of the previous battleship. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Doomsday Special Forces. Author, Huanjing Chengzhu. Chapter 1069. At this time, because Wang Feng did not turn on the video, Du Enlai and others in the defense fortress could not see the battle situation on the scene. They could only know from the radar display that Hu Tao, Wei Jiake, and Luo Yaxing had been rescued, but because the Yanhuang did not return immediately, but stayed in place and moved slightly, Du Enlai and others naturally knew that this should be a battle between the Yanhuang and the enemy ship. Before, they knew some of the situation of the battleship chasing him from behind through Luo Yaxing's continuous reports, but Du Enlai and others did not know that Wang Feng's enemy now was not that space battleship, but a group of them, so Du Enlai and others were not very nervous now. Although it seemed that the battle was not over yet, they thought that this was Wang Feng testing the enemy's strength, so they did not resolve the battle quickly. At this time, the energy beams fired by the Yanhuang had already attacked the energy shield of the battleship. Under the concentrated fire attack of so many energy beams, the energy shield of the battleship shook violently, but it finally resisted. Although their energy shield was close to the limit of collapse at this time, as long as it was not completely broken, the shield could be intact as long as it was replenished with energy immediately. Although this attack caused the energy reserve of the battleship to drop by nearly half, at least they had blocked the enemy's concentrated fire attack this time, and as long as they were given a few more seconds to recharge the shield, they could block it again. As for what to do for the third time, they didn't have to worry about it. Because now they are not fighting alone, they have their own people's warships. They can't give the human race's space battleship the opportunity to attack them 3 times in a row. What's more, in their opinion, the human race's warship has no chance to focus on itself for the second time, because they have just seen that all the warships of their own people have launched attacks on the human race's space battleship. Although their attacks would not be as neat as the human race's warships, hitting the target at the same time, and the range of the attack was not concentrated, but at least each stream of light could consume some of the energy of the space battleship. As long as his energy was exhausted, then what awaited him was only destruction. Just as the white light on the energy shield of the attacked warship disappeared, the creatures on the warship wanted to see what happened to the human race's space battleship. Suddenly a huge warship rushed into the sky from in front of their portholes, and then, their sight was once again flooded by the white light on the screen. It turned out that Wang Feng saw the reaction of the warship and easily guessed its intention, but Wang Feng still continued to launch his attack. Later, when he saw that other warships started to attack him together, Wang Feng still drove the Yanhuang and flew forward just when Hu Tao and the others thought that Wang Feng was going to rely on the size of the Yanhuang to hit the opposing warship. Wang Feng suddenly pulled up the Yanhuang and flew in front of the warship. At the same time, Wang Feng directly fired the beam cannon that had been recharged after the concentrated fire just now, and the target of the shooting was still the warship. Although the second shooting, because the interval between the 2 shots was short, most of the powerful beam cannons were not fired because they could not be fully charged. Only some small and medium-sized beam cannons launched attacks here because of the short charging time. But these energy beams were enough for the battleship's energy shield, which had already been consumed once. So, when Wang Feng's Yanhuang flew up, the battleship that he left behind shattered. And, because Wang Feng had just moved directly towards the battleship, he also avoided the attacks of most other battleships at once. Although the stream of light emitted by the battleship to the Yanhuang was completely borne by the energy shield of the Yanhuang, Wang Feng had been outputting energy to the energy shield, so it did not cause any damage to the Yanhuang. Just after the encounter, less than 5 minutes later, the enemy lost 2 battleships, which made Wang Feng's enemies very angry. Although the human race's space battleship was very large, the large size meant that it was easier to hit. In the previous attack, more than half of them were dodged by the human space battleship. Although this was related to the fact that they did not get too close to the space battleship in order to maintain the encirclement, in their opinion, with the speed of their weapons, this situation should not happen at all. Especially, after Wang Feng destroyed the second battleship, he went straight up, and the 2 battleships that blocked him at that time saw that Wang Feng seemed to want to attack them again like before, and actually hid aside and let Wang Feng out of their encirclement. This is not their fault, but Wang Feng is too fierce. After the war started, he only attacked 2 battleships and directly killed them. Although they had nearly 100 battleships surrounding Wang Feng at the moment, no one wanted to be the one he targeted. Because according to the current situation, the battleship he targeted must be dead. It would be fine if the first battleship died because of underestimating the enemy, but when the second battleship was destroyed by Wang Feng, they could see clearly that the energy shield of that battleship had maximized the energy output. It was in the strongest defensive state, but it was still blown to pieces. As for their clansmen in the battleship, of course there was no need to think about it, they must all be dead. Therefore, when Wang Feng drove the space battleship up aggressively, the 2 battleships blocking him had no idea who the human race's targets were, so they simply avoided them all. He turned on all the guns on his battleship and fired a salvo at Wang Feng's Yanhuang. Wang Feng didn't dodge the salvo at all. One reason was because he was fast. Even if he dodged, he could only dodge a small part of it at most, and he would miss the chance to break out of the encirclement. Now Wang Feng already knows almost everything about the fighting strength of this race. Now, it should be time to return to the defensive fortress. In addition, before returning, Wang Feng has another idea in his mind and is ready to try it. Seeing the human space battleship break out of the encirclement, other battleships immediately surrounded it, trying to surround the Yanhuang again. However, the huge Yanhuang, under the control of Wang Feng, moved quite flexibly. Not inferior to these small battleships at all. While they need to find a way to surround Wang Feng, they also need to prevent themselves from being suddenly attacked and killed by Wang Feng. Therefore, it is not an easy task for them to really surround the Yanhuang. How? Wang Feng piloted the Yanhuang and shuttled among the enemy ships. He tried to make the battlefield a little more chaotic, but the opponent seemed to have expected this tactic. No matter how Wang Feng made trouble, those warships followed him closely, and continuously attack Yanhuang. U3. Who is better at piloting a space battleship? Wang Feng asked the 3 people around him while driving the space battleship. After the other 3 looked at each other, they all shook their heads. Only Luo Yaxing said hesitantly, "I have flown it for less than an hour and only know the most basic flight operations." Hearing his answer, Wang Feng couldn't help but be startled, and then realized that these soldiers of the Hope Expeditionary Force were driven by small fighter planes. There were only a few space battleships, and once they flew, they consumed a lot of money, so these soldiers, of course there is no chance to practice flying with a space battleship. This is just like the captains of the commercial airliners in Atlantis. Why are their worth so high? Just because the cost of flying is too high, there are not many airlines that fly planes specifically to train captains. Okay. Luo Yaxing, come to me. After I leave, you will drive the Yanhuang and fly towards the defensive fortress. If I don't come back, you will drive the Yanhuang directly to the defensive fortress. Wang Feng thought for a while and then said, "Ah, boss. Where are you going?" After hearing Wang Feng's words, the three of them asked at the same time. "I want to go to their battleships to see what our enemy is this time. And if I have the chance, it's best if I can grab one of their battleships and take it back." Wang Feng replied. "Remember, just fly back after I leave. If you can't dodge those attacks, then don't dodge. I will leave enough energy for you to support the defense fortress, as long as the energy shield is not collected by them at the same time. Fire, then there's no problem. Got it?" Head. Luo Yaxing agreed, and then came behind Wang Feng, ready to take over from Wang Feng as the Yanhuang pilot at any time. None of them persuaded Wang Feng not to go, because in their eyes, basically as long as Wang Feng wants to do anything, there is nothing he can't do. This kind of confidence started from the Battle of Black Dragon Bridge, and Wang Feng was with them. Built in the heart. Wang Feng was driving the Yanhuang among the group of battleships while carefully observing the situation on the battlefield. During this period, he had been hit by many attacks. The opponent's weapons were indeed fast enough. Therefore, Wang Feng can no longer delay, because almost every second, the energy shield will cause him huge energy consumption. Doomsday Special Forces. Author, Huanjing Chengzhu. Chapter 1070. Those battleships were chasing the Yanhuang while attacking desperately. Wang Feng didn't know what kind of weapon the streamer attack they sent out was. At least he had never seen it before. It was very different from their normal energy beams. Moreover, this kind of stream of light is also an energy attack, but when it hits the energy shield, it seems to consume at least half less than the consumption of the energy beam on the energy shield. Although it consumes less, these streamers are too dense, and the hit rate is much higher than that of energy beams. Therefore, Wang Feng's energy consumption rate here is actually faster than the previous battle with the Cosmic Ghost Fleet. And Wang Feng cannot let them continue like this. With the defensive fortress as a big consumer, Wang Feng must now find a way to save the use of life energy. Wang Feng drove the Yanhuang while paying attention to the surrounding situation. He seemed to have found a good opportunity. Wang Feng directly drove the Yanhuang towards the outside. When passing by a warship that came to intercept him, Wang Feng shouted directly, "Come on!" Then, Wang Feng's figure disappeared instantly. Luo Yaxing, who had been waiting behind him to take over the driving position, reacted very quickly. As soon as Wang Feng's figure disappeared, he immediately took over Wang Feng's position, and his long hair instantly covered the control panel. Before Wang Feng left, he had helped Luo Yaxing find the right angle, and the Yanhuang had now left most of the local warships behind him. All Luo Yaxing had to do was to continue flying in this direction at full speed. After Wang Feng left, he appeared directly under the hull of the Yanhuang space battleship. Then he took out a small fighter plane directly from his Xianyuan space, then teleported directly into the small fighter plane, and immediately the small fighter plane was activated and flew towards the nearest warship. Because it was a chaotic battlefield, and countless streams of light were chasing the Yanhuang, shaking the Yanhuang's shields, the small fighter plane piloted by Wang Feng was not intercepted by them until it was close to the battleship. Find. They also knew that the energy shield of their warships could not withstand the direct impact of fighter planes, so the warships that were relatively close to the warship all used firepower to support their tribesmen, and countless streams of light flew towards Wang Feng's small fighter plane. As for the warship that was directly threatened by the small fighter plane, it launched a salvo directly at the small fighter plane. So, at this moment, the space around the small fighter plane was almost completely blocked. Boom! In the rejected explosion center, the small fighter plane driven by Wang Feng exploded directly and turned into a big fireball. Then, the big fireball was shattered by the subsequent stream of light and quickly dissipated. Got it? Due to the excessive concentration of firepower, there was almost no wreckage left of this small fighter plane. Only the black smoke still drifting in the air proved that it once existed. Of course, Luo Yaxing and the other 3 people on the Yanhuang also noticed this situation, but none of them looked worried about Wang Feng. Just kidding. Will their head just so recklessly fly a small fighter plane out to ram a battleship, and then be destroyed mid-flight, with not even a scrap left? This is absolutely impossible. Therefore, when this situation occurs, there is only one possibility. This small fighter plane was deliberately destroyed by their leader, in order to divert their attention, of course. As for the leader himself, of course he has already teleported to an unknown place. Anyway, they don't want to guess the boss's plan. Got it right? It's shameless. Did you guess wrong? Since I have no face, no matter what I do, I might as well seriously carry out the orders left by my boss and escape safely back to their defensive fortress. That's the business. Luo Yaxing and the others were right. Of course Wang Feng did not go out to seek death on his own initiative. Before the small fighter plane exploded, he had already teleported directly to the bottom of the battleship while the enemy's attention was on the small fighter plane. He teleported again and directly entered the battleship. The moment he entered the battleship, Wang Feng finally discovered his enemy. When he discovered his enemy, Wang Feng couldn't help but was stunned, because in the control hall of this battleship, they were all robots. Could it be that this time, my enemy is actually a mechanical race? These robots look similar to humans, except they are 2 meters tall. Their entire bodies are made of metal. There are antenna-like things on both sides of their heads. They have only 2 eyes on their faces and no mouth. It seems weird, even ugly. No. It's a human. Guard. Kill him. A voice came, and Wang Feng immediately cursed himself in his mind. No matter who his enemy was, he had to kill him first. Why was he in a daze at this moment? Once the news that he had entered the battleship was spread by them, his plan could not be completed. Thinking of this, Wang Feng immediately swayed and teleported towards the place where the sound had just come from. Then he directly picked up the Xianyuan sword and struck it at the source of the sound. The creature that made the sound before was very strange. It was not a humanoid creature. It looked very weird, even a little disgusting. This creature is about the size of a basketball. It looks like a human brain that has been enlarged. It also has eyes and a mouth, and there are many long and thin tentacles below. The sound just now came from the mouth of this strange creature. The location of this creature should be the control console of this battleship. There are many light spots on the panel similar to those of human battleships. It seems that the way this race controls battleships is somewhat similar to that of humans. However, although this creature has high technology, it does not seem to be very strong individually. The monster was directly split in half by Wang Feng. Then Wang Feng swung his sword again and killed a monster like him next to this monster with one sword. Then he put the bodies of these 2 guys into Xianyuan space. Because Wang Feng had never seen this kind of creature, he didn't know whether his sword could kill them, so it was safer to put them into his own space first. At this time, all the robots in the control hall moved and rushed towards Wang Feng. Wang Feng quickly sensed the energy fluctuations from these robots, and then held the Xianyuan sword in his hand and began to fight with them. Now Wang Feng has roughly guessed the race they encountered this time. Their real enemy should be the 2 monsters he just killed with Xianyuan sword. As for these robots, they should be made by their race. And just now Wang Feng has looked at this hall. In the whole hall, there are only these 2 strange creatures. The others are exactly the same robots. Even when Wang Feng was attacked, there are still some robots, as if they didn't see Wang Feng, and they are still operating this battleship. Wang Feng guessed correctly. The enemy they faced this time was the creature that looked like a brain, which was their enemy this time, the Bree tribe. The body of this creature is quite weak. Even an ordinary human can easily kill them, but they are actually the most technologically powerful race on the entire primitive star. The technology of the goblins is inferior to theirs. It's just that the Bree tribe never appeared in the outside world because they thought they were too ugly. Because of their advanced technology, the races around them kept their distance from them. Even on the original star, no other race could see their true form. Originally, when they appeared in the outside world, they would have a mechanical body, but because they were now in their own warships, and they didn't expect that there was such a strange power as teleportation in the world, so Wang Feng saw their true form. As for those robots, they were their own helpers, or slaves, because these robots had no thoughts of their own and only knew how to execute their orders. Just like now, after the two guys in the Bree tribe found that Wang Feng had entered their warship, the two Bree people who had never exposed their bodies to other races couldn't help but panic, so they actually forgot that they should warn their own people first, but directly let the guards kill him. This is also the instinct of the Bree people, because they have been accidentally seen by creatures of other races before, and these creatures who have seen them were all killed by them without exception, so they are so mysterious. It can be said that there is basically no race on the primitive star that knows their existence, let alone seeing them. And they are not like the goblins, who rely on selling weapons and equipment and other technological products to earn energy, and do not need to contact any race, so they have always been wearing this mysterious veil. Now that this human race has seen the two of them, they will naturally kill them, and the order they issued is for the guards to kill Wang Feng, so naturally only the robots who serve as guards will execute the order. As for the other robots, they continued with the previous orders, either staying on standby or manipulating the weapons on the spacecraft to continue attacking the Yanhuang. As for Wang Feng, without receiving orders, they will not pay attention, let alone notify other warships.